A day late, but never a dollar short here on the Red, Gold, and Bold podcast. We come to you on a Wednesday. Normally, we're Tuesdays at 8 p.m. if you're catching us via the podcast. Tonight, a little bit late. Some family obligations for everybody. We do it on a Wednesday. Much to cover here during the Chiefs bye week. What is your expectation for the offense coming out of the bye week? Do we think it's all going to get fixed? Does Andy Reid wave a wand with a few extra days to get things going in the right direction? How much blame do we put on Patrick Mahomes? Is he getting a free pass for the offense having some struggles? Do you see Rashee Rice getting more opportunities? Short yardage, is that going to improve? Can they fix that during the bye week? What expectations do we have for the defense over the second half of the season? Does Chris Jones have to do more? At least not get stupid penalties. We could ask that question. What are you looking for in the game against the Philadelphia Eagles? It's a Super Bowl rematch. We'll give our predictions on who wins. We do it all right now on the Red, Gold, and Bold podcast.
You're listening to the Red, Gold, and Bold podcast, the most in-depth analysis of the Kansas City Chiefs on planet Earth, breaking down the Chiefs like no one else can. Red, Gold, and Bold is hosted by Jeff Chadiha, Eric Eager, and Soren Petro. Jeff Chadiha is a senior columnist and on-air personality for the NFL Network and NFL.com. Eric Eager is the vice president of research and development for Sumer Sports. Soren Petro is the afternoon drive host of the program on Sports Radio 810 WHB in Kansas City. The Red, Gold, and Bold podcast is proudly brought to you by Gann Asphalt and Concrete, Kansas City's nationally recognized full-service paving and pavement maintenance contractor, making parking lot problems disappear since 1994. Free consultations, no commissions, in-house crews, and every project comes with a written warranty. Find them online at GannAsphalt.com or call 816-484-3338. Gann Asphalt and Concrete. One contractor, all things parking lot. Now, here are the hosts of the best Chiefs podcast, Jeff Chadiha, Eric Eager, and Soren Petro.
And good evening and welcome here to the Red, Gold, and Bold podcast. I'm getting confused. We'll do the Too Deep here in a little bit, but let's talk about the Kansas City Chiefs here on our Red, Gold, and Bold podcast. Jeff Chadiha, Eric Eager, Soren Petro with you. And guys, let's start here, Jeff, with the expectation. The offense fell out of the top five after the game with the Dolphins from a yardage standpoint, something that, many people thought could never, ever happen to the Kansas City Chiefs. They're not anywhere near the top five when it comes to scoring offense. What do you expect for this offense over the last 8 games?
I would expect Andy Reid to make some, I don't want to say drastic changes, but I think he will make some market changes to how they're doing business. It would not surprise me if they started to, I think, wind down the rotation a little bit. Maybe have a little bit less of the guys who aren't performing, a little bit more of the guys who are, like Rashee Rice, who we'll talk about. I think they'll find more ways to get the ball to Kelsey creatively. I mean, you look at his numbers outside of those 2 big games he had over 100 yards. He's averaging 42 yards a game in every other game. The other 7 games, that's not good. The offensive line, I imagine, will find a way to play better with Andy Heck working with them. And I think they have to find a way to get somebody else involved in the running game outside of Isaiah Pacheco. I mean, that's quietly been a big concern for me because I don't think he's the kind of guy who can last an entire season at the pace he's going. And nobody else really has emerged as any kind of a running threat. So I think a lot of things are going to change in the bye week, or will change after the bye week. And I think that Andy probably will look in the mirror and say, I gotta coach better.
Eric, what are you looking at? Do you see this as a team? I love what Jeff said about somebody else running the ball, like Isaiah Pacheco. I think you want to get him into the postseason healthy so he can still be a threat there. That means somebody else has to carry some of the load if they're going to go light in the box. I totally agree with that concept. What do you see changing as they head down the stretch?
Yeah, I think there's just going to be more definitiveness. Like there's going to be more. I mean, there's 2 ways they could go. They could trust the wide receivers to develop a chemistry with Patrick Mahomes in the sort of ad-lib game. I just don't see that being a particularly good bet. So I think that they'll probably go and have more quick game, have more things quickly to guys like Rashee Rice and Kadarius Toney, guys that can make plays after the catch. I agree with Jeff that the running game, you need to find a second back. Like, I just don't know where that's going to come from, though. Is it going to be LaMichael Pirine? Is it going to be Clyde Edwards-Helaire? Is it going to be McKinnon, a guy who they've kind of put a glass box the first half of the season, I think, for decent reasons. All of those, I think, are possibilities. And then, the other interesting part is last year they ran a lot of 13 personnel and were very efficient out of it. This year, without Jody Fortson, Blake Bell is kind of like not that guy. And so I wonder, what they're going to do as far as like getting, more tight ends on the field is kind of what they did last year because the receiver depth. I don't know if they have that capability this year.
Yeah, no, I listen. I don't think there's a magic bullet. Can we agree with that? That this is not going to suddenly be a, okay, look, it's entirely different. They're all, run and shoot football is here. Although I think there's some principles of run and shoot that actually might be effective for the Kansas City Chiefs. But that's clearly not what we're going to see. We're not going to see schematically things change drastically. Is Mahomes getting a free pass? He's not having a bad year by QBR. He's third in the NFL behind Josh Allen and Brock Purdy. I don't know. Maybe that explains why QBR's got, we're seeing some faults in that as a statistic when I hear Brock Purdy's up there at number 2 with the way he played coming into the last couple of weeks. But, does Patrick Mahomes have to bear more of the burden on this, Jeff, or is that laughable? Is it really what's going on around him? And God, where would this team be without him?
Well, there's an aspect of this, and I know Chiefs fans are always going to go berserk when you get critical of the quarterback, but trust goes both ways, right? I mean, it's one thing for receivers to always be blamed for not getting open or dropping passes, but he also has missed opportunities to hit guys or passed on opportunities to hit guys in the flow of the offense. And I think it's very hard to play the kind of football they played over the last 5 or 6 years, and then just become a lot more methodical. I mean, they were able to do it a couple of years ago, different weapons involved. They were able to do it last year when he was playing out of his mind. But I think generally, like, if you have a fast-breaking basketball team, they want to run. They don't want to play in half-court sets. They don't want to do all these things that you have to do to win games when people start to take away your ability to run the court. And so that's what I feel is happening a little bit with Mahomes. And it seems a little bit bizarre, and I'm surprised no one's ever brought this up until now. He spends a lot of time with these guys in the offseason. Like, how can you not have trust with these guys with as much time as you're spending with them? And so I think that will probably get figured out a little bit too. I think that he'll have to throw the ball more to guys who aren't in situations where they're wide open or doing the right things. They can't all be ad-lib football, as Eric said, and I think he's going to have to adjust to that.
Where do you sit on Patrick Mahomes and what he's been able to do? How much of this is him? We've talked about it. Is he not, there's all the cut-ups and gifs of plays where you can see where the receivers are. I've had discussions with folks about like, hey, is this just, I see the guy open, but it's Sky Moore. I mean, does he just not want to throw the ball to Sky Moore because he doesn't trust that Sky Moore's going to catch the football? I mean, there is a chicken and egg to why you're not throwing to the open guys. Eric, is this a Patrick Mahomes problem, or if you put good receivers around him, he will throw to the guys he believes will catch the football, and this offense will go?
Yeah, I don't really find excuses for Patrick Mahomes compelling because he's management, right? Like we all have various levels of responsibility at work. And, when, the worst leaders are the ones that point fingers, right? They're, and not to say that Mahomes doesn't, no, Mahomes hasn't pointed fingers, but as far as like, people who are defending him, I don't find that compelling because he's management, right? Like when they lost the Super Bowl to Tampa Bay, they put a ton of resources into the offensive line, and that's going to come at the expense of wide receivers. When they won the Super Bowl last year, they had an improved defense at the expense of wide receivers. And I think that Patrick is probably like they're putting something on his shoulders. Remember, they gave him a raise this year, right? They gave him a multiple year raise. And, the thesis behind that is A, he's the best player on the planet, but B, we don't need to spend this money elsewhere. All the dollars we put into Patrick Mahomes come out. $1 comes out as $2. $3 comes out as $5. Like that's what paying an elite quarterback is. So he needs to overcome this. I think that there are some games, I think of like the Jets game, where he just gets bored and tries to throw it, to places where it can't go. I think in 2021, it was a similar vein. Last year, for the most part, he humbled himself is the wrong word, but like he took what the defense gave him to such surgical precision that we're seeing that abate a little bit this year, where he's not, the patience isn't necessarily there sometimes. I think that's got to be it in the second half. So if I were to make bets, you think about guys who are going to have big second halves. I think Jerick McKinnon's going to have a big second half. I think Noah Gray, Travis Kelce, big second. I think the guys underneath that Patrick's going to have to go to when the wide receivers aren't open, and he can't just throw, interception type passes down the field. I think it's going to be, beneficiaries of that are going to be the underneath players, the backs and the tight ends.
The Red, Gold, and Bold podcast is proudly brought to you by Gann Asphalt and Concrete, nationally recognized full-service paving and pavement maintenance contractor. Parking lot problems, they've been making them disappear since 1994. Why risk accidents and liability in your parking lot? You don't have to. Get your parking lot restriped today. Get it smoothed out. Whatever the problem might be, Gann Asphalt and Concrete can fix it. One contractor, all things parking lot. That's Gann Asphalt and Concrete, online at GannAsphalt.com. How much of this is an Andy Reid issue, Jeff? I like what Eric is saying about, like, look, he's part of the management team. He's part of what put this together. So you don't get to be like, well, hey, I'm out, which, by the way, Patrick Mahomes hasn't. But when we evaluate it, we have to evaluate it through that lens. I think that's right. But how much of it is like, listen, whether they catch it or not, kid, you got to throw it there. Like, this offense is designed. We can keep talking about scaling down, and we're going to get to Rashee Rice in a minute, but scaling down the number of receivers. But Andy Reid's offense, if you're going to keep playing it the way it's played it, is that everybody on the field is a threat. If Mahomes isn't throwing to everybody, everybody's not a threat, and it gets easier to defend the offense. Is this a Mahomes to Reid issue, Reid to Mahomes issue as far as run the offense the way it's designed, kid?
Well, I feel like there's some of that, but this is a strange circumstance with this team this year, because I feel like in a lot of ways they're a victim of Andy's trust, of Brett Veach's trust, maybe even Mahomes' trust in the personnel, that there's a group of guys here that they're trying to figure out, who we're trying to develop. And look, Clyde Edwards-Helaire obviously has been here much longer than anybody thinks he should have been, but they still have some kind of faith in him. They were high on Tony. They were high on Moore. They thought MBS could be a complete receiver. There's all these visions they had for these guys that aren't working out. And I think it's very tough for coaches who've had the kind of success that Andy Reid's had to look in the mirror and say, maybe I was wrong. I just about one guy, maybe two guys, maybe three guys. I've seen this happen with Mike Shanahan. I've seen it happen with Brian Billick when he didn't have Randy Moss and Chris Carter and he went to Baltimore. I've seen it happen with Mike Martz when all of a sudden he didn't have Kurt Warner and Eisberg. All these guys who are great offensive minds think they can make it work with anybody. And unfortunately, they have to learn the hard way sometimes that they cannot. And I think this is a season when there's so many different guys who are in this boat that they've had these grand desires for, these grand visions of, that it's really just, it's a combination of bad timing. It's a combination of hubris. It's a combination of execution. And I think Andy is a big part of this.
Is the personnel side, Jeff, a vision? Do they have a vision for what those receivers are, or is everybody enough of an adult in the room in an NFL personnel setting to understand that they have a hope for? And then you hand that hope to the coaching staff, and it's up to them to try to reach that vision. Like, is that, would you look at it and say, Brett Veach's staff, we all would acknowledge, has done a very good job. He's put enough talent around to win 2 championships, 3 conference titles, so on and so forth. But do we look at it and say that the plan for the receivers is flawed, it's wrong, and they made mistakes? Or do we look at it and say they're giving Clay, coach has got to mold better?
Yeah, I think it's the former. I think it's flawed to a certain extent, and it's flawed because, look, they hit on Tyreek Hill, they hit on Travis Kelce. These weren't guys who were first-round picks who walked in the door and then became Hall of Fame guys. These were guys who they took and saw certain skills in and said they can fit with what Andy wants to do. They've done it with a number of different other players. Mecole Hardman has zero value outside of the Chiefs. Byron Pringle has zero value outside of the Chiefs. Demarcus Robinson, when these guys are here, they play a lot better. And so I think that's part of the thinking. And what they do is that, hey, we know what these guys are. We know how they work for us. Sooner or later, they're going to come around. Even last year with Moore, with Sky Moore and Kadarius Toney, they made plays in championship moments. The AFC Championship game and Super Bowl. All that stuff lingers in the minds of coaches and personnel people because you say, see, that's what they can be if you give them enough time. The problem now is time is moving a lot faster and maybe running out on some of these dudes.
Personnel question, Eric. Is that what this is? Do we need to be talking more about like, hey, they're not shopping on the right aisles for the guys they're getting for this offense?
I mean, I don't think so. I think that they made a bunch of calculated risks at these positions, and they didn't work. Like, what would we have rather the Chiefs done, right? Last year, you think about think about wide receivers last year, right? You had Olave, Wilson, Dotson, Burks, and I'm missing a couple, but like by the time it got to pick 20, all 6 of those guys were off the board, right? So, I mean, Christian Watson hasn't been much of anything, Jameson Williams was another one that came off the board first. And so you're like, well, what, they took Karlaftis and Duffy. Are we upset about that? No, like that's a pretty solid move. Pickens is one where I think like you could legitimately say, okay, that wasn't maybe the best choice, but at the same time, like it's, again, it's just you picked a wide receiver in round 2 and you whiffed a little bit, but there's not like it wasn't a priorities issue. It was just a pick the wrong player issue. This past season, all 4 wide receivers that were taken in the first round were taken ahead of the Chiefs pick. And we're not going to ask them to trade up. You look at free agency, I guess DeAndre Hopkins has been better than I thought, but still that would have cost them significant capital. Wide receiver in free agency last year, if you didn't want to get Christian Kirk at 18 to 20 million, you had to get Marquez Valdez-Scantling at 10. And then this year, a bunch, Jacoby Myers could have been a thought for them. But for the most part, like they let Juju walk, and Juju's been useless this year. So I just think like we look at the rest of the roster, and I'm not trying to be a homer here, but you look at the rest of the roster and you're like, they've made a lot of bets, a lot of them hit, and we're mad that the gambles that they've made on players, for example, we're mad that only the offensive side has failed because the defensive side is mostly all hit.
Jeff, I think the receiver thing is interesting. Number one, let's go to the free agent tote board as to what was signed during this offseason and tell me what it is that the Kansas City Chiefs should be accused of making a mistake on. Allen Lazard, 4 for $44 million. Jacoby Myers is by most total dollars spent. 3 for $33 million. DeAndre Hopkins, 2 for $26 million. Right. And we can talk about that one. He's played well. He's had a monster game. 13 million per. Go ahead and back out the 13 million of other players that you're going to take off this roster to make that fit for people to like, oh yeah, that's the one. Okay. Well, they're right at the cap. So you got to lose 13 million for that guy. Adam Thielen, 3 for 25 million. Robert Woods, 2 for 15. Odell Beckham Jr., 1 for 15. Darius Slayton, 2 for 12. I mean, I'm not hearing DJ Chark down here is a name that I think is a guy that looks like he would fit with this team. I think he'd look a lot like MVS in a Chiefs uniform, to be honest with you, though. 1 for $5 million. Like, I don't hear the guy in free agency that like you're like, well, boy, there it is. There was the cost-effective guy that makes this receiving core much better.
Yeah, I'm not banging at the drum for that either. I think that's fool's gold largely, and you've seen that as the name you just rattled off. It really is more of an issue of they have to develop the guys they got better. And sometimes you just get duds. Like there's a lot of teams out there who just can't. Like, the New England Patriots have been horrible at drafting receivers throughout the entire time Bill Belichick's been there. It's just something that, and partially because similar issues. They have a very complicated scheme. They ask a lot of the players who play in it. It can be tough for guys to grow in those kind of circumstances. But I would make the analogy of it's like investing in startups. Just because you hit on TikTok doesn't mean you're going to hit on everything else that comes down the pipe. Mm-hmm. Like all these guys to me are like startups, and they've got to find a way to make it work with them.
I think that's a wonderful analogy. The flip side is too, though, just because you bought the stock that, the penny stock that went bust, Sky Moore, doesn't mean that every stock that you buy is going to be crap. Like you get out of the receiver business. I think that's a great point. Eric, 378 yards and 4 touchdowns for Rashee Rice so far. Rashee Rice is tied for second most receiving touchdowns of any rookie that was drafted this past year. Only Jordan Addison, who went number 23 to the Minnesota Vikings, has more. He has 7 touchdowns. Sam Laporta also has 4. Tank Dell has 4. The Texans wide receiver had a couple in that big game that C.J. Stroud had the other day. The receiving yards, however, He comes in at 8. And again, just the receivers that are tops have topped him in receiving yards. Puka Nacua has 827 yards, 5th round pick, 177. It happens. Jordan Addison again, 534 at number 23. Josh Downs went behind Rashee Rice at pick number 79, playing with the Colts. He has 483 yards. Zay Flowers went 22. We know the Chiefs had a fascination with him by most accounts of some trades that were maybe be in the works. He has 472, but only 1 touchdown with Lamar Jackson throwing to him. Tank Dell, I just mentioned. He was picked 69, went in the 3rd round for 454. And Sam Laporta, the tight end, to the Lions, 434. Michael Wilson, pick number 94, 3rd round pick of the Arizona Cardinals, has 401. And then Rashee Rice is 378. Puka Nacua seems to be the one that everybody clearly missed on, including the Rams, for 4 rounds because he's played at a very high level. Otherwise, do you see anything there when I rattle those names off where, oh my God, the Chiefs really blew it? And long term, do you feel super bullish on, Josh Downs or, Michael Wilson, any of the ones I said that were there besides Puka Nacua that the Chiefs didn't take?
Yeah, and I think Puka Nacua, a lot of that is obviously a very good player, but a lot of that is opportunity, right? Like that with Cooper Kupp out of the lineup and really no tight end who's a difference maker, like who is Matthew Stafford supposed to throw to? Plus, they're behind a lot. That's another part about Chiefs football this year is Chiefs are playing from ahead a decent amount, so it's not as much opportunity for the receivers. No, I mean, I think Rashee Rice is kind of the one stock to use Jeff's analogy, like you're looking at and saying this one could hit. And so I don't look at that and say, wow, Brett Veach really screwed this up. I think I'm actually waiting on Rashee Rice to mature a little bit, and I think he's going to be the one that when everybody goes back and looks at Veach's history and drafting and says, wow, he can't do X, I'm going to be like, well, I think that you're overreacting a little bit. I think that he's gone 1 for 3 at wide receivers, and that's a pretty good hit rate.
Jeff, listen, we talk about how the offense might look different. I don't know what Andy Reid's got planned, but I think if this team is going to be at its best, they will target him enough that he gets to 1,000 yards. That means 622 yards receiving he needs over the last 8 games. Now that comes down to basically, about 75, 80 yards a game. That's the change that I think needs to be made. Because when I look at these names, the guys that were drafted, Josh Downs and Michael Wilson, I don't think are necessarily better players. I like Josh Downs. I liked him coming out of North Carolina when we were talking about receivers in the draft, but I don't think he's any better than Rashee Rice. I mean, that is the key at some point, whether it's Mahomes throwing to him or Reid calling it. I don't see where this guy's a flawed draft pick. I think the flaw is that they only looked at him twice in the last game against the Dolphins.
Yeah, and there's a reason for that, right? I mean, it's not like if you see the talent and you see what he's doing with the ball in his hands, you would think the ball would be coming to him more often. So there's something that they see in him that is concerning about him having a larger role. And maybe that's just they're too caught up and everybody else has got to get the ball. Maybe that's part of this. Maybe Mahomes is, when he's back there, is not thinking about I gotta feed this guy as much as I feed Kelsey. But if you really think about the stuff he's caught, and I'm a Rashee Rice fan, I think he's got great potential. A lot of in-breaking stuff, a lot of hitches, go to the back of the end zone, sit down, you're the 3rd or 4th guy in progression. It's not a lot of really sophisticated things that he's doing on the field. And so I wonder just if they are going to start trying to do that, is he the kind of player at this point in his career who can really handle more attention, more involved coverage? It's harder. I mean, again, I love what he's doing, but just running slants and running in routes, like I've never seen him run a post. I've never seen him run post corner. I've never seen him run a dig, or get the ball in those routes. And so I do think, and I think there were questions about him beating man coverage when he came into the league. The crazy thing is he was supposed to be this great 50-50 ball guy, and I've never seen him get a 50-50 ball thrown his direction. So that may be the area where he could actually see him really progress in the second half.
Eric, I asked Trent Green, who played for Dick Vermeil, great offensive mind. Al Saunders is a play caller. They set records there. Mike Martz with the Rams and Norv Turner with the Commanders. Those are pretty good offensive minds. I said, listen, was there ever a time where you looked at it and you said, hey, let's stop with all the ornate stuff. We've got a couple of plays that are working. Let's run the hell out of this, right? Like Tim Grunner once told me, he said, listen, Joe Pendry wasn't solving any riddles of offense as our offensive coordinator, but if we had a play that worked, he would run it 10 times in a row. He wasn't afraid to do that. And when I asked Trent that question, he said, every one of those guys I had to go to and say, hey, come on, this is the one that's working. He said he had a conversation like that with every one of those offensive minds I talked about. Somebody need to have that conversation with Andy Reid. Like, Jeff's right. I haven't seen a lot of ornate plays to Rashee Rice, but when he runs the slant, it works. When they ran the slant to Kadarius Toney against the Dolphins, and I know I always bring up the slant, but just some simple routes. That's the easiest one that I can think of, but simple routes to get the ball in the hands of the playmakers, other than these bubble screens and tunnel screens, some real receiver routes that are just shorter, that are quick hitters. Is that conversation need to be had, Patrick, to Andy? Like, let's listen. Let's do the things that work.
Yeah, I think the only leak in that argument is the fact that both men like the creativity aspect of it, right? Like, if it would be different if Patrick was more of a Kirk Cousins type, where he was like, I need to get rid of the ball, yada yada yada. I think that the problem is both guys like the goofy stuff, and so I agree that in theory that should be the case, but I don't know if Patrick is the one to deliver that message. I mean, even Trent Green, who is phenomenal quarterback in the NFL, is sort of more of a kind of more of a driver of the car than a Patrick Mahomes is. Does that make So yeah. I get that, but I think that in a weird way, this is why this offense has been so amazing, is because both guys lean into the creativity. And so, when things are going well, you see Mahomes in the top right of every graph, like 5 units away from everybody else. But when they're struggling, I think both guys struggle to just kind of get back to basics and to throw the stuff that needs to be thrown.
With free consultations, no commissions, in-house crews, every project coming with a written warranty, GAN Asphalt and Concrete can keep your parking lot safe, help you focus on your business. No unnecessary delays and costly expenses that come with liability of a poorly striped parking lot. Plus, make a great first impression and a great last impression with your parking lot. It's the first thing your customers, your clients see when it comes to your business. Let GAN Asphalt and Concrete take care of your parking lot the way they've been taking care of parking lots in Kansas City since 1994. Call 816-484-3338. Find them online at ganasphalt.com. Short yardage, Jeff. Is there a wand to be waved on short yardage? Do we have any reason to believe it's going to get any better now coming out of the bye week?
Another area that I would assume they would spend a lot of time looking at, because they've gotten to the point where they are so far down the rabbit hole of let's try to find a way to gin something up and scheme it up so we can just get that 1 or 2 yards, that they're becoming so obvious. They're showing their cards when the formation is presented to the defense. That their inability to line up and run the football successfully in those situations is a big problem. And I think Eric, going back to the point he made about the tight ends, I think that's part of the problem. I think you have a lot of receiving tight ends. And it's very hard to line up. Not just the linemen take the brunt of the blame for some of this stuff, but when you have 2 tight ends who are not great, Rob Gronkowski type, George Kittle type blockers, that also affects what you can do in short yardage situations. So I think it's going to be a problem all year long because it's not their personality. They've tried so many different things now, and I think teams know clearly that they're frustrated with it. You mentioned in that Miami game, like they were just A-gap wide open. Let's go. We'll give it to you. And just knowing that I'm to the point now, and I know people have said this before, Mahomes just shouldn't be on the field in those situations. If that's what it's come to, and he's just going to be a decoy and not be a real option, put Blaine Gabbert in there, run the sneak. Russell Wilson at 34 and at 5'9" and 100 and whatever, 200 pounds can run a sneak. Your quarterback can do it too.
Yeah, I think that's the one that everybody's waiting for, and I think they're going to do it. I think he's waiting for like the Super Bowl to do it. And at that point, I think the A-gap will be covered when you get there, right? Like, oh, wait, no. What are you doing? We're just ready to run it. Now you're going to cover it. I'm with Jeff, Eric. I don't think it gets better. They've had years to solve how to be efficient in short yardage, and the defenses are way ahead of them. Unless they're going to start quarterback sneaking it, there's no reason in my mind that this is going to get any better.
I don't know about that. I mean, the Super Bowl where they lined McKinnon up at fullback and, made a big – I think that the big plays are there. I just think that Andy messes around too much. And I also think –
but listen, I don't think Jeff or I are saying they'll never convert a one to go. They're just not going to be good at it. It's
no, not relative to how good they are as a regular offense for sure. And I think part of it – and no one wants to talk about this, and I said this on the show last week, but this is why we give coverage no one else gives. Trey Smith and Creed Humphrey have not been as good as they were as rookies and second-year players. Like they're also not getting the push, and not to say that like they're failing on the 3rd and 1s. It's more like it erodes confidence when you know that your 2 point of attack players on the right side of the offense are not playing as well. And so
and no real fullback, right? You don't have fullback.
No real fullback, right? And Blake Bell, like Blake Bell's a nice story, but like I mean, he doesn't really road grade either as a tight end. He's kind of so no.
Does it speak to the mindset of the Kansas City Chiefs? They're blocking tight end like quarterback and belt.
Yeah, exactly. And
that's right.
I mean, are we ready? Like, yeah, that's the thing. So like we just have to. It's just one of those things where we take the good with the bad. I do think like Chiefs fans tend to like hate that statement because they want this team to be like optimized at everything. But this is like one of the bad things about the Chiefs is like on 3rd and 1, it's absolutely the moon to that team at times.
Yeah, it is. The good news is you take the good of the bad. The good is the defense, Jeff. It has been very good. Top 5 all year long. It has not wavered. And they ran into the best offense in football when they played 2 weeks ago and held them 20 points under their scoring average and 160 yards under their yardage average. That was a tour de force by that Kansas City Chiefs defense. And if not for listen, I think he'd be the first guy to admit it, a brain dead penalty from Chris Jones. It would have been 4 less points, right? Or maybe 7 less if they miss a field goal, but it would have been a field goal try instead of a touchdown on the next play for the Dolphins. That does not look like it's going to go away, and there's no reason to think the bye week is going to make them any worse.
No, as long as they can stay healthy, and Nick Moulton not being there is something you have to be concerned about going into games against teams like Philadelphia, who are going to run the football and have a pretty good offensive line. But as long as they can avoid significant injuries, they should gain confidence and get better with each passing week. It used to be a couple of years ago when Tyrann Mathieu was here. I would jokingly say like the defense is pretty much Tyrann Mathieu, Chris Jones, and Frank Clark on a good day. If those 3 guys aren't showing up, you're playing pretty bad defense. And now you've got 11 guys, probably 2 or 3 other guys who are role players stepping in and really contributing. That's hard to beat. And so I feel like they've turned a corner, and not having been around them that much, I get the sense that they're starting to think that they're the ones who are like it's a defensive first team now. Like they're the ones who are deciding games. And they probably have won 3 games for this team, the Miami game, the Denver game, and the Jacksonville game. So that gives you a ton of confidence. And you've been around these guys, Soren. I mean, they're good dudes. I mean, you definitely, when you get around certain teams, you see what kind of players you are. When you talk to guys like McDuffie or Justin Reed or Karlaftis, people like that, they're really solid guys. So you can see why there's chemistry and cohesiveness, and they're smart. And so, yeah, they should continue to get better and probably lead this team when it comes postseason time.
We're going to talk about the Eagles more later, Eric, but maybe peek ahead to that one because they are such a good running team and their quarterback does present a threat running the ball. The Chiefs, if there is a leakiness to them, they've quietly, and we know throw to win, run when you're winning, is definitely the mindset. And I think stop the pass and you'll win, and then we'll worry about the run later is the mindset that people would want. But they are down to 16 ranking wise, or were right around the middle of the pack as far as the run defense goes. Is that a concern with teams like the Eagles? That will pound the rock on you, will run the football. Does that worry you in the second half?
Yeah, they're 5th in EPA per play overall, but when you look at EPA per rush, they're second worst. Only Carolina is giving up more on the ground in terms of expected points. But it's sort of exactly what you said, Petro. That's netted out to half as many, ranking in half in terms of total yards. I think the Eagles present a challenge in that way. But let's remember the Super Bowl. The Super Bowl, it wasn't the running game that killed the Chiefs in the Super Bowl and why they gave up so many points. It was the downfield stuff to AJ Brown. It was some of the stuff that Goddard and it was Jalen Hurts, right? And Jalen Hurts, people forget that, if it's like Michael Dana or somebody gets Jalen Hurts to the ground on that 4th and 4, it's a totally different game, right? So I agree that it's going to be an issue, but I think it's more of an issue, guys, for the Chiefs offense. I think it just means that there's going to be fewer possessions. The Eagles get you to 4th and 1 as a defense, way more than other teams. And then they just add, that's 40 more seconds. You don't get to play offense. I think it's going to be something where I think the Chiefs will hold up, but what it's going to do from a point standpoint, but what it's going to make is every offensive possession more valuable for this team because they're not going to get as many.
Jeff, I'm actually optimistic that they're better than that against the run than what it shows. Call me a homer because I'm a Chiefs fan, but the game against the Denver Broncos, one, they didn't get any help from the offense staying on the field. And if you can keep your offense on the field, you're not giving up yards with your defense. The defense gets better sitting on the bench. I think that's one thing and Javonte Williams averaged 3.1 yards per carry. And I think the Denver Broncos came in and said, we're going to run the ball. And I think the Chiefs knew, listen, this is what they have to do. They were ready for it. I think they defended it better than maybe the overall quantity, the 150 plus rushing yards that Denver ended up racking up there. I think against the running back, they were really good in that game against the run. But the Eagles are going to come in and run. Antonio Pierce, you got a linebacker as a head coach now, and you got Josh Jacobs making a check. That guy's going to get the football against the Chiefs. They're going to say, you're coming out to Vegas? We're going to run the ball. They're going to play them twice. They're going to pound the rock. Bill Belichick knows his only shot is to play 1990 Giants football. Ramondre Stevenson is coming at you with the Patriots. I do think that we're going to find out if this run defense is good, because I think those teams that know that they're punching above their weight against the Chiefs are going to really try to shorten the game, and they're going to do it with the running game.
Yeah, and again, Nick Bolton not being in there is a factor in that. And you're looking at teams. I feel like for the last few years, teams have tried to attack the Chiefs defense first and foremost by throwing the football. They wanted to attack the secondary. If Tyrann Mathieu wasn't out there, or if he was banged up or not playing well, then I think there was money to be had. And now teams are realizing that you don't want, if you're going to throw on them, you better throw on downs when they're not expecting it. So you're seeing a lot more teams trying to throw on early downs, and teams that want to run the football consistently, even if it's not getting great, having great success doing it, it's setting them up for better situations. You do not want to be in 2nd and long, 3rd and long against this defense with Spagnuolo's creativity, their pass rushers, and their cornerback play. It's just too hard to execute in those situations. And so I think what you're seeing now is more. I agree with you. I think more teams are going to come in here and try to not just shorten the game, but just try to beat them up. Chris Jones, who we'll get to in a moment, has not shown a lot of interest in defending the run recently. Like I said, Nick Bolton being gone. Drew Tranquil, who I love as a linebacker, is a more athletic, I don't want to say a finesse linebacker, but he's not a guy who's going to deliver a blow and knock somebody out and send somebody back a couple yards. So, these guys want to hunt in the passing game. And so once you become that kind of a defense, you kind of have to start grinding it out against them.
Eric, let's talk Chris Jones, because I think we saw the first time that the structure of his contract can be an issue for this team. He is tied for second in sacks right now on the season with 5.5. He and Michael Dana, behind George Karlaftis, that has 6. That is a wonderful thing for this defense, by the way. That is great news for their overall success. The fact that there are other guys, everybody's a threat. I think those guys certainly benefit from the double teams that Chris Jones is getting, and he's getting a lot of them. But we saw him lose his cool against the Dolphins. I think he was pissed because he couldn't get to the quarterback. I think he was pissed because there's millions of dollars riding on him getting sacks. And early on, when he's ticking off a sack and a half every game, yeah, look at me. See, I got a raise. I did the right thing in my contract. When he goes 3 games without a sack, He's taking a pay cut, right? Like that's what, and he knows that's the scorecard at the end of the year is it's going to say Chris Jones held out and took a pay cut, and it's not going to look good. And nobody likes to look like they made a mistake, right? Do you worry about the psyche of Chris Jones if defenses, I think, rightfully continue to double team him and he's not getting the stats he needs to get that number where it wants to be?
Yeah, it's always going to be an issue. I think that's been a tension. I mean, Chris Jones had $1 million bonus in 2021 if he got to 10 sacks as well. And like, you know, this is not something. We saw how well Chris played last year, you know, playing more snaps, all this stuff. But like, as we talked about the entire offseason and we talked about trades and we talked about holdouts, like Chris Jones is not who we like. Every player isn't what their PFF grade was the immediate last year, right? And like fans acted like Jones was going to turn into this everything everywhere all at once player. And while he's fantastic, I think that, you know, this is the leak, as you said, Petro. This is the fly in the ointment, if you will.
It's Jones' psyche a concern? Is, you know, do you worry about that this could go south if all of a sudden he goes a couple more games, no sacks, and he starts to see that number's or is that the best thing that could happen? Let that 15 sack thing go by and look like it's impossible and embrace the role of the decoy.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. It has to be on his mind. Any player in this league who is in a contract situation is going to be thinking about making money beyond this year. I do feel like there's frustration there, partly because he was playing at such an incredible level starting the year out when he came back that, you know, you're not going to sustain that forever. But, and just like, I think the same is true of the receivers, by the way. I think a lot of these guys look at their stats and say, am I getting a second contract in this league, catching 30, 40 balls for this team? And so, yeah, Chris Jones certainly is aware of that, but you hope that as they go down the stretch here, that he does not, I don't want to say tune out. That's not a great phrase for this, but I do wonder, and I thought this when he came back, how much is he going to care about his future versus what this team is doing? And that's a very real thing for every player who's done what he's doing. Like most veteran guys who are in this situation, and I think he's loved being here, he's loved winning, but I think he also loves money. And I think if it's going to be a situation about him staying healthy or him going 100% all out and giving the team everything, I think it's going to be going for staying healthy and trying to get his money.
Yeah, we all love money, or at least the security that money brings us. We're not trying to make him sound like a money-grubbing pig. That's not the here. We would all like to make more. And we all like to make more, one, because it validates the performance that we do. If we make more, they're saying, listen, you're more valuable. And so I think it is about the money, but it's also about him validating himself as the best defensive tackle in football. Stats, sacks, that's another way to do it. So I think that's why he likes that stat. And he's in a tough spot because this isn't the 22nd ranked defense that's 16 in points allowed, like it kind of usually has been during his time here, to where he can simply walk to a microphone and be like, well, if you use me more or line me up in different spots, this is a top 5 defense. There's no recourse to we should do it a different way. No, you shouldn't. It's as good as it can be. So I think that's a difficult spot for him as well, is that your agent even doesn't have a line like, well, they misused him.
Yeah. Well, he's also becoming the older guy in the locker room too, right? He's no longer, even though he's not 30 yet, he's not as young as Karlaftis or as Amenahue or Mike Daniel, these other guys. Frank Clark was his boy, and now Frank Clark is gone. And you see these guys. Justin Houston went through this, towards the end. Eric, what's his name? God, I always forget his 29. What's that?
Oh, number 2, Eric Berry.
Eric Berry. Yeah, Eric Berry went through this where it was, you kind of become a little bit isolated. And when I've watched Chris Jones, I'm not trying to read too much into his body language here. It feels like he's doing his thing. And when he makes plays, he's like, yeah, I've made a sack, but it's not like he's celebrating with the guys or kicking it with the guys. He goes back and he sits down. Even with the penalty, he just went and sat down and was just like, all right.
Yeah, that's how Chris has been the whole time, though. Like, he just happened to be an amazing player on a defense that needed him a lot more than they need him now last year, right? Like that. It's funny, but
Frank Clark, to your point, I think that's a great point, Eric. He is kind of a different cat, and you can see that when you're in the locker room. Not that he's a bad guy or isolated or people don't like him, but he's kind of a different cat. And we even joke Well, what are we getting? Are we getting soft-spoken, kind of quiet, seemingly moody Chris today? Or are we going to get, let's turn on the switch and joke and talk about Joe's Kansas City barbecue and fries and, which one are we going to get? I mean, he is kind of a different cat, but Frank Clark was the one guy, Eric, that was kind of, he would, to Jeff's point, go over and sit down next to Frank. That was his, to the point of calling it Sack Nation, which was Chris Jones. And look, here's my guy, Frank Clark. That clearly was his boy.
Yeah.
Well, and they didn't bring back Frank. I think like Chris Jones is dealing with, and we've all dealt with this, right? We've all been in part of companies, where, the you read the writing on the wall and it's time to sort of think about other things. And like, I think Chris looks at like them not bringing back Frank, them not bringing back Frank a second time after Denver let him go, and being like, oh, so this is a real business thing. Like if it was Patrick Mahomes, they would bring, somebody, they would have brought back the Frank Clark equivalent for Patrick Mahomes, right? So he totally sees the difference between him and the true superstar guy on the football team. And that can be a little jarring. And I think like it's just human nature to, and we're not saying Chris Jones is detached. We're just saying that like there's an element of there's an I just work here kind of like vibe with that. And like I don't blame Chris at all for that. I mean, it's kind of who he's been this entire time. When you listen to him talk and you listen to other people talk, like it's been that way. And he just happens to be so freaking talented that he can overcome that in a lot of years. So it is something to monitor for sure. And I think like the odds of Chris returning to Kansas City are pretty small, I think, relative to how then maybe earlier in the year, given how everything is shook out.
We're probably brought to you by Gann Asphalt and Concrete, Kansas City's best when it comes to solving any and all of your parking lot problems. Make sure you tell them you heard about them here on the Red Gold and Bold podcast. You can find them online at GannAsphalt.com. Every project comes with a written warranty. Well, they're the best in the business. Been doing it since 1994. Again, online at GannAsphalt.com. Eagles game. What are you looking for, Jeff? What expectations? What do you want to see?
Well, it's a great matchup. We know Andy Reid coming off a bye is a pretty good bet to produce at a high level, get this team going at a high level. But then the Eagles are also coming off a bye too. That allows them to get a little bit healthier. Jalen Hurts has been banged up with that knee. I expect to see the kind of game we saw back in the Super Bowl. It's both these teams are playing at a high level. The Eagles, as we've just mentioned, have some things that can give the Chiefs problems. The Chiefs, their passing game, this is a great opportunity to take advantage of a secondary that hasn't played very well. Like the Eagles' pass defense has not been good. They've had a lot of different guys coming out of there over the last month or so, and so I'm excited to see Jalen Carter against the Chiefs' interior linemen. I'm excited to see Trent McDuffie against A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith. I think it's going to be a heck of a matchup.
Yeah, I love the matchup. The one game they've lost is to the Jets. Eric, great defensive team as well, great defensive personnel. What do you expect out of this matchup between the Chiefs and Eagles?
Yeah, Jeff brought up a lot of good points. I think the Eagles have been sneakily not as good defensively because the secondary, when you buy the dip on a guy like James Bradbury, you get the good with the bad, and you've gotten some of the bad this year. You got a lot of good last year. Darius Slay is a little older. They had to go out and get Kevin Byard to play safety because they have depth issues there. Linebacker Nakobe Dean's out. That's a guy that, so their linebackers are like the Eagles are kind of like on that second tier of like analytics where they're picking up Nicholas Morrow and Zach Cunningham in August and using them in off-ball linebacker type stuff. But yeah, it's going to be a huge test. Jalen Carter, Jordan Davis, the whole front for the Eagles, both sides of the football. Like this is going to be a huge matchup for the Chiefs on the line of scrimmage. And it's going to be a big game for Patrick Mahomes to sort of, be patient and to manipulate the pass rush as well as he did in the Super Bowl. So I'm excited for it. I think that, I think the point spread, which is about 1.5, 2.5 is probably correct in this game.
406 yards. The Dallas Cowboys had even time of possession. The Cowboys went up and down the field, Jeff. Dak Prescott just couldn't punch it in. But he over the course of the game, 3 touchdowns, no interceptions. I mean, when I look at this, I say this is a great measuring stick for the Chiefs offense because this Eagles defense is not a lights out defense. And so they should have some success. And if Dak Prescott can go 374, 3-0, I think Patrick Mahomes in this offense should hang 300 plus passing yards and should not turn the football over. I mean,
Yeah. Yeah.
you know, if Dak can throw 3
Yeah.
touchdowns, I'm not gonna say Patrick has to throw 3, but like it's there for the taking. That they should get points against this team.
Yeah. I mean, hey, be careful. Miami's defense wasn't that great coming in, and all of a sudden they weren't going against them either.
Well, and I said should, not will. I haven't made my pick yet.
Yeah.
They should.
Yeah. They don't. If they had CD Lamb, I'd feel better about that possibility. But yeah, there are some opportunities that should be had out there with this defense.
Dallas figuring out over the last 3 weeks that they have CD Lamb is like one of those Instagram videos of like the baby putting glasses on and being able to see for the first time.
Yeah.
They're like,
This guy's pretty good. Yeah.
Mike McCarthy making an absolute 3-course meal out of 1st and goal from the 6 with 27 seconds left with a chance to win. They were going to run a quarterback sneak and got called for a false or quarterback draw and get called for a false start. That was one of the most embarrassing displays of sort of in-game management from the Cowboys. Yeah, the Eagles should have lost that game.
Yeah, but they are down at the bottom of the pass defense rankings.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Like they're one of the worst pass defenses in football. Now I think part of that is they play from in front and teams are throw to try to get back into the game. So I don't think they're as bad as maybe their ranking.
Yeah.
But there's no reason for the Chiefs to not have some success passing the football.
Right. Yeah, no, they missed their cornerback situation. As Eric said, Bradbury hadn't been great, but after those two guys, Slay and Bradbury is a mess. I mean, they went out and got Bradley Roby and played him the first game he was in there. That Reed Blankenship's been hurt. They miss Avonte Maddox. They miss C.J. Gardner-Johnson. The wild card, the X factor here is Kevin Byard. Like what he brings to them, having a bye week to get up to speed with the defense. He's only been there for 2 or 3 weeks. He could be a difference for them. But yeah, I mean, if they can get into manageable situations, and there should be some shot opportunities and some chances to make plays in the passing game with this group.
All right, let's have some predictions, Eric. You want to lead us off? What happens in this game? What do you think?
Yeah, I'm actually going to go lower scoring. 23-20. I think the Chiefs, cover the small number. Patrick as a small favorite or an underdog is a pretty good bet, as people realized last Sunday. I think that you're not going to see that many possessions, and so it's going to be huge for the Chiefs to not drop passes, to not waste possessions, because the Eagles are going to. I think the Eagles are going to move the football in a slow, methodical way and limit the number of possessions in this game.
Yeah, Jeff, what do you see?
I got Eagles 24-20. I thought this was a game that they would lose when the year started, and I still feel like the Eagles are the better team right now. So I think they beat them up on the ground pretty good.
I feel the exact same way you do, Jeff. I mean, and I almost always am picking the Chiefs because I think it's almost always a good when in doubt, pick the Chiefs. They usually win, right? But I think you're getting there with the Eagles too. My hesitation is I do think that the Eagles hit some rougher patches as things go. And I expect them. I think Eric's right. Less possessions. Eagles going to run the ball. Like we talked about, every team is going to say, listen, this is where they're weak. Let's keep him, Patrick, over on the sideline, and let's pound the rock. And so I expect the Eagles to pound the rock, but I expect the Chiefs to be ready for that. This game to me is going to be someone's kicking a field goal to win it. I actually am inclined to say 24-21 Eagles, but it's at Arrowhead. It's a bye. There's all those things. I'm just going to, again, I'm going to kick myself if I'm wrong on this, but I'll have the Chiefs kicking the field goal. I'll take a 24-21 Chiefs. That's where I'll go on that one. But I got no problem. And anybody who gets pissed because Jeff picked the Eagles is a clown. Because I think there's all the reason in the world to pick the Philadelphia Eagles in this one. All right, that's going to do it for us here on the Red, Gold, and Bold podcast. Remember, we're brought to you by our friends at Gann Asphalt and Concrete. Free consultations, no commissions, in-house crews. Every single project comes with a written warranty. They're Kansas City's best when it comes to solving any and all parking lot problems. One contractor, all things parking lot. That's Gann Asphalt and Concrete. Find them online at GannAsphalt.com. For Jeff Chadiha from the NFL Network, Eric Eager from Consumer Sports, I'm Soren Petro saying thank you very much for joining us here on the Red, Gold, and Bold.